Hi, everybody. My name is Stuart. I'm the director down here at the Arts Lab, and thank you so much for coming to the lab tonight. I'm really excited about this talk we're getting ready to have. This is my first time with a microphone. I usually get up and just talk at a crowd. No one can hear me, and they just kind of smile and nod. First thing, Valerie told me to remind you that the restrooms are down this hallway, and to please silence your phones. Also on your way out, we've got a mailing list now, so please grab a little sheet next to the door so you can scan the QR code and sign up for a mailing list to keep in touch about all the awesome events we have, because we've got some really amazing ones in February. It's crazy. We're really busy. I want to thank you all for coming. The dean's here. There's the dean's here, and Christine Purrington's here, and Mary Songus. So thanks all for everybody for coming out. Tonight we have a special guest speaker. This is part of the Gale Memorial Lecture Series, and we have Pippin Barr joining us. Pippin Barr is an associate professor in the Department of Design and Computation Arts at Concordia University in Montreal, and he's also the department chair right now. So I'm so sorry, and thank you very much for for doing that. Pippin's actually, about a year ago, I was reading Pippin's book on the airplane, and I thought to myself, oh my God, it'd be amazing if I could get this guy to come and give an artist talk, because I love this book. And then here we are a year later, and Pippin's joined us all the way from Canada. So thanks for coming out, and here's Pippin Barr.
I'm a teacher of programming. I'm an ex-computer scientist. But primarily for it's been like a decade and some years, I've mostly been thinking about and practicing what I will call experimental game design, making weird games where you're not totally sure, is this a game? But then you play it to find out, and then you've been fooled, and you're in there. I started officially making games in 2011. I just moved to Copenhagen with my wife, and I'd been assigned to teach a course called Experimental Game Development. And I'd never made a game in my life, so I was like, oh, this could be a problem. The students, may not respect me if they find out I've never made a game. So I immediately started making games as a way to kind of gain their respect. And I made this game here, Guru Quest. It was the first game I made. It was about the meaning of life. So I wanted to start with something simple and kind of build it up from there. It's a game where you start off in your little house. You walk across these wooded hills to this temple here. And then you can just talk to this guru about whatever you want, really. It's a text-based interface. You type what you want to say, and the guru responds. This is long before ChatGPT, of course. And the secret to this one is it's based on Eliza, the famous chatbot from the 60s, who was programmed to act like a Rogerian psychotherapist. So she would always you would say something, and then she would say, well, how does that make you feel? And then just keep doing that over and over again. So I repurposed Eliza into this kind of stereotypical guru persona who responds with sort of aphorisms and things that don't really make sense. What is the meaning of life? A sleeper knows that he sleeps. Sounds good. Like if you feel like you're in on it, then it sort of plays into that experience that you're looking for. So I developed a real taste for game design and development. It felt like a really great combination of the things that I was interested in, particularly kind of technology and programming and building things with computers, and philosophy and art and the other things from my education. And I've made a lot of games since then. One official tally that I keep has it at 87. It's arguably kind of more than that, because some of those are like packs of a bunch of different games. And they're about all kinds of stuff: chess, art, plane crashes, snakes, water, the Oregon Trail, all kinds of other things as well. And so I'm going to take the opportunity tonight to do a kind of artist's talk in the traditional vein, kind of profile some of the things that I think have been most important over what I guess I have to now call a career as a game designer. But I want to shape it with some specific themes that I think are really important and have come up for me again and again. And the first one relates to that book that Stuart held up very generously. Because one of the things I think about a lot in connection with making games is materiality. I was lucky enough to get to write a book about this. It's called The Stuff Games Are Made Of. It's with the MIT Press. Came out in 2023. It's in open access, so if you want to just download a PDF onto your phone right now, please feel free. I won't be hurt by the lack of book sales. And the idea here is to look at video game design which is a relatively well understood practice. There are a lot of books about how to do it. But to look at it in terms of the things that we make games with. So there are chapters on more obvious things like rules, computation, graphics, user interfaces. And then there's more conceptual materials in the second half of the book, time, cinema, violence, money. And the overall idea of the book is kind of getting both designers and players to spend more time thinking of the constructedness of games, what they're made out of. In parts because I think it's fun. I mean, it's just interesting to think about the composition of any artwork. But I also think it really can lead to more informed and exciting design and play as well. So we've got materiality. The other thing, I love this word, estrangement. This is an idea that comes from a Russian literary theorist called Viktor Shklovsky. In this paper, we've got some nodding, excellent, Art as Technique. And he's writing about it as a literary technique. So it's about this idea that a very powerful thing that literature can do, maybe especially poetry can do, is make you aware of things that you normally don't notice, that are just kind of banal or slip beneath your attention because they're just so normal. And it's about bringing those things to your attention by making them strange or surprising in some way. And I think video games are a really great place to practice estrangement because they normalize all kinds of things that I think are very odd that we enjoy so much, like violence and the meaning of heroism and capitalism and colonialism and all of the big C words. And I think that video games are interesting for another reason, which is that when we play them, they can potentially help to estrange our lives too, that we can get back to that kind of Shklovskian idea of reflecting on life through our play of video games. So it's kind of the two big overarching themes that I want to kind of get to. And then with those things in mind, I want to look at three key materials here. Three things that when we play games, we're not necessarily thinking about for one reason or another: time, money, and the rules themselves that underlie the game. And each one of these has turned out to be kind of a long-term preoccupation for me one way or another. And I think also, speaking to the Shklovsky idea, again, you can see that these aren't just ideas about video games, right? These are fairly large, influential ideas in our lives as well. So let's start with time. Traditionally, this is one of the least visible elements of video games, right? If you're playing a game, often you have that experience where you're playing and you look up and it's dark outside and you don't know where the time went. And you're like, oh, but I'll play a little bit more anyway. So, minutes and hours go by, sometimes days go by if you're at a cyber cafe in Korea. And much as in a casino, part of that is down to how game design works, right? It's trying to create that experience. It's trying to negate time in some sense. Conventional wisdom in game design tells us that immersion and that sense of timelessness are really key to a successful game. You want to sell it on Steam, that's what you want, timelessness. But for that exact reason, right, we're artists here, how might we defamiliarize video game time and kind of see it and look at it? So here's one answer. We'll get there. This is not a video game. There's this great performance artwork. I'm sure some of you know about it, maybe some of you don't. This is Marina Abramović's performance work, The Artist is Present. This is in 2010. In this work, she sat in the atrium of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City on this chair, not a very comfortable chair, no pillow. And she sat there all day, every day that the museum was open for about 3 months. And the artwork was that anybody could come and sit down in the chair opposite her, look into her eyes for as long as they wanted to, no talking, just eye contact. And then when you felt that you were done with the experience, you would get up and leave and the next person would come. And that's it, that's The Artist is Present. About all kinds of things. Maybe most obviously it's about kind of this idea of bridging the gap between artist and audience, which traditionally passes through some other medium like a painting or a sculpture or a video game, and just making it completely direct. We're just looking at each other. There the artist is present. But I think this is also a work about time, about making time visible, most especially through Marina Abramović's body and presence over all that time, making people feel time, even just by looking at the work. And so in 2011, I was in Copenhagen still. I was teaching this experimental game course. And I'd been telling my students about Marina Abramović as like an interesting reference point for them to think about how to experiment, how to try things that challenge the norms. And we were talking about it, joking about it. And in a fit of bravado, I told my students, I'm going to make a video game of this. And it sort of started out as a joke. I was like, this is the worst possible idea for a game, just sitting in a chair. Like, we couldn't come up with something less exciting. But, as with many jokes in art, artworks that start out as jokes, they tend to turn into something else over time if you explore them. And so in my video game version of this is from 2011, you play as somebody visiting the museum, so you're not the heroic Marina Abramović, although I did make a sequel where you are. You are visiting the museum to go and see her. And it struck me as interesting because it's just so against all of the principles of game design, right? It's like it's slow, not much happens, it's in a museum, you're not the hero, you're just this generic kind of minifig person who's going to go in. Every time you load the game, you just look different. There's no sense of an identity. And so there's this idea immediately to sort of estrange the player from the sense that it's a standard video game. But in my research, when I was sort of looking into the performance work itself, it was so apparent that the audience experience of that work is all about time too. And it's about a secret kind of time, because the truth of the matter is that very few people got to sit with Marina Abramović because she's incredibly famous. Everybody wanted to do it. There were like mad scrambles and fights to get into the queue. And then people were waiting for hours and hours and hours at the museum just to get this chance to sit with her. So it's about time as well. Okay, so here we are at the museum. We've showed up. We're in our singlet. And one of the things about this museum and time is that it has opening hours. So you might go and it might just be closed. So you load up the web page, you show up, and you weren't there during the opening hours. It's closed on Tuesdays. It's closed on Christmas and Thanksgiving. So if you show up then, it's not open. So time is immediately in your face, like right away with this game, right? It's respecting time. Time is a real presence in the world of the game. It also uses New York's time zone. So when I used to exhibit it in Europe, often nobody could ever get into the museum because it was always too late. The museum had closed. And some people never got in, but one of the really interesting and I think encouraging things is that people wrote to me and they said, I played your game, the museum was closed, I loved it. This was like one of the best game experiences I've had in quite a while. It was like, it's shocking, right? It's like, oh, something different happened, that's great. So, making the museum inaccessible in that way, it gave the world a kind of a weight. It felt like a real place. You had to respect the place. It wasn't just there for you to do heroic things. It's an inconvenient experience. Still, eventually it does open. And you go in, and you walk into the ticket area. You have to go buy a ticket, obviously. So you do that. You've got gray hair. This person has gray hair. This is a different person. Costs $25, pretty expensive. That's not a real $25 though. That's the pretend $25. Otherwise I wouldn't be here. I'd be in the Bahamas or something. Time is money, so you have to pay for the experience. And then once you've bought your ticket, you can go over to the security guard who won't let you in otherwise, whose hair is fading into the doorway there a little bit. And you can walk into the hallways of the Museum of Modern Art, heading towards this performance. And like viewing some kind of hallowed, low-resolution images from art history that, again, are sort of serving to underline this idea of like, this is serious business, this is art. You are in a proper museum. And eventually you get to the Matisse, and you see that there are some people just kind of standing there. And you're like, okay, what are they doing? It's a queue. And so you might join the queue. And now you can start waiting. Now the game begins, really. And so the game is asking you a pretty important question right now, right? Like, is it worth waiting in line for this? This is a question that people had to ask for the real performance. You have to ask it in the video game as well. This is worth it. Time and attention are your main currency when you're playing a video game. If you want to spend them on whatever this is. And there's all kinds of pressure because a queue implies that the thing is like worth waiting for, like a really good brunch restaurant or something like that. It's like, yeah, these people wouldn't be waiting if it wasn't a good thing, so I'm going to wait as well. That's how queues work. They're a visualization of kind of worthwhile time. And the museum space, again, is kind of doubling down on that. Like, museums have important things in them, and you should wait to see them because it's, virtuous to do so. And video games double down on this even further, right? Video games, one of the main things about them, at least, not my games, they promise never to waste your time. They're like, yeah, this is going to be great. Anything that you can do in a game, like wait in a queue, you should do. That's kind of, it's like almost the moral nature of play. If you can, you should. So you should wait, but it takes a really long time. So I did a bunch of research for this game this is not a video, but like it could be. This is what it's like to play. The queue moves about once every 20 minutes on average, but it has a huge variance. I did a bunch of research into how the show, and how the performance played out, how long people were waiting. Sometimes people stay for a minute and then the queue moves up. Sometimes they're there for 10 minutes and the queue moves up. Some people stay for a couple of hours and then the queue moves up. 1 or 2 people stay for 8 hours from like opening to closing, and nobody else in the queue got to go in. That can happen in the game as well. It's a random number generator, so I can't tell you what's going to happen. So, it's a pretty intense queue, and in a queue you feel time very intensely, right? Time becomes estranged. It becomes apparent to you. It's weird to have to do this waiting, especially in a game. So perhaps you leave the queue because you're like, well, I'm at least going to go and see what I'm waiting for. And you walk over here, you walk to the front of the queue, you see what they're waiting for. They're waiting to sit in a chair opposite this woman in a red dress, and they're just looking at each other. And you have that existential question again. Oh, that's what it is? Is that worth it to me? What will it be like if I did sit down in that chair? Why is it being considered valuable? Do I even have the endurance to find out? Do I want to spend my time on this? And there's video game questions in there as well, right? Surely this guy has not made a game where I have to wait in a queue for 5 hours to sit in a chair, or did he? Is there a way to cheat? Could I circumvent this? Is there a gun somewhere that I could use? If I did wait, would there be an amazing payoff? The game doesn't tell you. So maybe you do go back and you're like, all right, fine, I'll go and wait. And I've done this. Not many people have, understandably, it's a sport of champions. Watch out for that guy. Yeah. That was pretty close. Okay, so you go back and you join the queue. And the weird thing about this game, so this is the experience. It's very intense. It's hard to explain to you because you're not doing it right now. It's a very intense experience. And the main reason for that is I designed the game to resist any kind of cheating, basically. So you have to actively wait. You can't go away and make an omelet and like have dinner somewhere and then come back and move up. Because if you do that, the people behind you will just move in front of you. You can't just not be there when the queue moves. They think you don't care. And you can't get one of those bird things that does this to just keep pressing the key or something. Get a child to do it, whatever it is that you want to do. Because that's interpreted as shoving the person in front of you. And you get ejected from the museum by security. So you really have to be there. You have to experience the time. So there's a guarantee that if you do this, you will really have done it. No bathroom breaks. You can sneak in a bathroom break if you're lucky. You just have to be there. And you can get to the front of the queue. I did. And you can sit with virtual Marina Abramović. And it's pretty amazing. I made the game and I thought it was pretty amazing. I've had it reported to me by other people that it was pretty amazing and stressful, incredibly stressful. Somebody panicked when they were walking to the chair and missed the chair. And then that was it for them. It was pretty sad. So you just have to take the time and find out for yourself. That's all I'm going to say about it. I'll go through this a little bit quickly. I actually had the opportunity to work with Marina Abramović a couple of years after I made this game. She saw it. She was really into it. She's a pretty interesting woman. And I made some other stuff with her around things like her Abramović method, which are, again, these very slow motion things where you can kind of feel the presence of time. So this is counting the rice and sesame, tiny little sesame seeds, you put them in the sesame cup, rice, you put it in the rice cup, keep going. This is using a physics engine, doing it as a video game, mirroring that exercise that she assigns to her students. This one was more for me. I was interested in this idea of duration. She calls her practice long durational performance. And so I made a series of games of different durations. There's a 1 second game, 1 minute game, 1 hour game, 1 day game, 1 week game, 1 month game, 1 year game, 1 decade game, that's this one, 1 decade at the slot machine. In this game, you show up at the slot machine, you pull the handle, and then it takes 10 years for the dials to stop spinning, and you find out if you won after 10 years. I have not played that game. It goes up to a millennium. There's a band playing that you have to listen to for 1,000 years. They're not very good. And I've been fascinated by the idea of eternity as represented by computation. So this idea that a computer, if you allow it to and look after it well enough, that it will run for as long as it possibly can. So you can portray infinite punishment like Prometheus here. And the computer will just keep doing it forever. You can just sit there struggling on the rock. Your liver gets picked out by the eagle. It goes away. You wake up again. It keeps happening. And because it's a computer, you know it's just going to keep happening. You can really enjoy it long term. So that's the first adventure into estrangement, in this case, the material of time. Creating video games that sort of help us to feel time in one way or another, to think about it, to question it, to notice it more than anything else. So let's get to another important thing, money. Money is super important. We probably all know or have the sense that video games involve a lot of money, right? Maybe you know that Minecraft has sold hundreds of millions of copies. It's unimaginable how much money that guy, who I'm not gonna mention his name, has because of this. Maybe you heard that Cyberpunk 2077 costs over $400 million to create. It's just one video game. Amazing. It does look very good, though. Maybe you've heard of people spending tens or hundreds or thousands of dollars on a hat to wear in a video game. Like this hat. Apparently this hat sold for $4,400. This blue hat over here in RuneScape. So you can wear it and show your friends. Maybe you're a game developer and you have bought things to put inside a video game using something like the Unity Asset Store to go find a 3D model of an awesome car or a motorbike or something, and you stick it in your game and use it and own it. I came into this sort of backwards. I wasn't thinking about money, and then money confronted me, as it so often does. In 2017, I was working on this game called VR3. It's an exhibition of water. So you go in, it's based on Donald Judd's 100 works in mill aluminum, 100 untitled works, I should say, in mill aluminum in Marfa, Texas. And there he's exhibiting these sort of glossy stainless steel, aluminum cubes. In this game, I was exhibiting water, different kinds of water that you could have in Unity, the built-in water that Unity has, water that my friends gave me as a gift, water that you could buy, water that was free, etc. And after I made that game, the thing that was most apparent, the thing that showed up again and again when people were thinking about it, was how powerful money was as a way of provoking people into comparing different kinds of water and thinking about what the qualities of water were that they paid attention to and cared about. Because you would go in and there would be a really cool water that my friend had given me. Looked great, it was really nice, it was a gift. And then there'd be this water that cost like $11.99 that looked kind of terrible, quite frankly. And immediately, because of the money, you're like, what? What's going on here? And you start thinking about what's going on there. It's like comparison shopping, right? It's like it turns on this part of our brain where we want to start thinking about value. And value can be a crass thing, but it's also a concept in philosophy. Like, what is the value of this thing? What are our values in relation to this thing? So I wanted to make a game sort of about that specific idea, because game experiences, they don't typically draw attention to the money part of things, right? That would not be good for business. Usually they feel kind of peaceful, closed off from the feverish capitalism of the outside world. And the project that I want to talk about started with me buying this Sahara Desert by Black Sun Productions for $4.99. There you go. That's what it is. It's a square kilometer of desert. I thought it was really beautiful. Again, these things it depends on what your relationship is to them. Had beautiful dunes, they flowed nicely, the beautiful kind of lighting effect because of its bump map. It was just a really nice piece of desert. All this for only $4.99. And my idea was I would create a kind of art park in the spirit of the Chinati Foundation in Marfa, or the Storm King Art Center in Windsor, these sorts of like big places where you walk around and see big art being art in the world. And I was going to populate it with 3D models from the Unity Asset Store. And $4.99 turns out to be the minimum that you can charge. If you're going to charge for an asset, $4.99 is the minimum price. And so I was going to use that as the price point. So everything in the desert would cost $4.99. And the idea there is that you would, want to compare things because they all technically are worth the same amount of money. So then you're hopefully stimulated to ask yourself, well, but are they? What are the things that make them worth that amount? And that's kind of a Noah's Ark. So there's 2 examples from every category in the 3D section of the Unity Asset Store. So there's like reptiles and historic buildings and cars and trees and spacecraft and office buildings and all kinds of stuff in there. 2 of each, side by side. And it was about, this invitation to compare, to think about the stuff that games are made of, quite literally, and to think about the values associated with that stuff in the form of money in this instance. And so it's called VR $4.99 for that reason. It's really about estranging both the objects, like looking at the objects instead of just kind of brushing past them, and also just estranging this idea of money is everywhere in the media that we're experiencing. So I want to show you a couple of the exhibits. So this one's hard to miss. It's right in the middle of the desert. It's the Taj Mahal to scale. You can see it from everywhere. It's kind of like a landmark. And it has an informational plinth, they all do, that tells you about it as an artwork. So we're trying to channel the art experience here. So Taj Mahal by Chandan Kumar Singh. It's in the 3D environments historic section of the Unity Asset Store, if you happen to be looking for it. Version 1.0 launched pre-COVID Taj here, 1st of July 2019. And it's 136.4 megabytes. Maybe that means something, I don't know. $4.99. And when you run into the Taj Mahal, there are some questions that come up, right? Maybe you compare it to the desert. Sitting on top of the desert cost $4.99, the Taj Mahal cost $4.99. How do they compare? The Taj Mahal is a very complex object, you can see. It's very recognizable, it's famous. Maybe celebrity has kind of like a value to it. It's big, it's a building, which is nice. It's beautiful. Maybe the desert is kind of boring compared to this. It's nondescript, it's pretty repetitive, just like sand, basically. But the desert is pretty special because you can it's a place, you can walk around on it. And the Taj Mahal actually has no colliders, so it's like a ghost of the Taj Mahal. But maybe that's actually kind of cool. Maybe it's cool to own a ghost of the Taj Mahal. So I don't know. There's a lot of things to think about. The Taj Mahal is 100 megabytes bigger. Is that better or worse? Does that make it more or less valuable, the file size? So which one would you buy if you only had $4.99? You have to think about it. It depends. So the idea then in this game is this combination of a museum presentation, which is meant to activate your sort of critical faculties to some extent, aesthetic appreciation, and then a market presentation, just like the crass, like this cost this much, what do you think? Hopefully leads to this kind of critique process that just emerges naturally because you can't help yourself. You want to think about it. The economic rational actor emerges and has some art criticism to give to us. And the thing that I also find really important about this, it's less about money, is just I think it's really important and beautiful to just look at the assets themselves. A lot of these things are amazing, but if you're playing a video game, you very rarely pay attention to them. I have this friend, he's still alive, friend Chad, he was an environment artist, and he blew my mind once when we'd both been playing Alan Wake, the original, so quite a long time ago. And I was telling him about, I was scared and I was killing zombies. And he was like, I brushed past a shrub and it was a really amazing shrub. The way that it bent was very beautiful. And he's changed how I thought about that stuff forever with that conversation. So here's another asset. We can practice this comparison again. 2 columns of animals facing each other along the ridge of a sand dune here. On our left, the realistically modeled and textured Animal Pack Deluxe V2 by Jan Peck, or Jan Peck, maybe. Pretty cool. They look pretty realistic. They're animated. 2 elephants moving their heads around and trumpeting and looking elephanty. That's value. That's worth $4.99 for sure. And you can see there's tons of animals behind them. It's not just the elephant. There's a huge amount of animals for $4.99. And then on the other side, we've got these ones, the low poly rigged animals by Dalaba. Now they're just standing there. There's a giraffe in the front, and a bison. There's only one elephant. The other one has 3 elephants. But they are rigged, which means that they've got sort of little skeletons, which means we can articulate them and make their bodies do things. We could animate them. That's good too. So we can make this direct comparison because in some sense they're the same thing, right? They're both a collection of animals. So they seem like they just do the same thing, serve the same purpose. But there are tons of distinctions between them that would allow us to think of them in terms of value for money or just value. We could ask, just what's the better experience, the best bang for our buck? And we probably, instinctively we might say it's the deluxe ones because they're deluxe. That's, good marketing by Jan Peck in the title. Better value for money because it's deluxe. They're more complicated, they're animated, there's 3 elephants, higher resolution textures. Everything about them is better. No giraffe, but everything else about them is better. But the low poly animals, they look a bit rigid, but they're low poly for a reason, right? That's a very popular art style in video games. People use that style to communicate ideas, to keep their game sizes smaller. And if I was making a low poly game to follow that particular trend, or is what I was looking for, there's no way I would buy the realistic elephant and stick it in that world, because it would look, I would actually, but like generally speaking, you wouldn't, because it would just look ridiculous, and that would be great. So there's a really key thing in that, right, which is there's a relationship to a hypothetical game that's being made. Every time you look at an asset, you're thinking about, well, where does this thing go? What is the game that it will live in? What are the experiences and feelings that it's meant to engender? And so the game is sort of asking you to think a bit like you're an artist, like you're going to use these things because that's what they're for. What do you imagine making with this? And the artists are another important part of this, right? This is arguably my favorite asset. This is Maxim Bugramov's humanoid creatures pack. These 5 creepy, nameless monsters kind of dancing. A little bit like they're auditioning for Magic Mike, if you ask me. And they're not really doing that. They're not dancing. They're going through all of their animations in one big long chain. They've got a ton of, 40 distinct animations, and they do them all in a row, and it just looks like joyful dancing. It's very beautiful. So they're very scary and very happy. But here we have the hard-working artist, right? We've got Maxim Bugrimov, who made these things. He's a real person. And when I was scouring the Unity asset store, over the time that I was making this game, I ran into his stuff all the time. I became obsessed with him, in part because he made Stalin statue in 5 materials. It's like, wow, who's buying Stalin statue in 5 materials? It's such a weird thing to make. And this is my absolute favorite. Dead man in the bag. Don't know what you use that for necessarily. I actually bought it literally yesterday because I was like, I have to own this before I go down to New Mexico. And I love it. So I've got it now. If anybody needs it, just email me. And so I ended up thinking of myself as kind of like a fan of Maxim Bugrimov. I was like, oh, this stuff is just so cool and weird. The models that he makes are kind of valuable to me in part because he made them, and it's part of this artist's sort of body of work that I care about and I think is interesting. And that's another thing that gets forgotten all the time in games is just like the people who made this stuff. It's like, again, it's like this huge unsung group. The people who are paid to make the world that we inhabit. Okay, one last one. This is Seagull, Laris Canis, by Junichi Suko. And you can see the seagull. And seagull's pretty complicated because unlike other assets in this desert, it was actually designed to be controlled by the player of the game. So it is actually mapped to the same controls that you're using to kind of move your ghost visitor around. The seagull responds to the same controls, just as a matter of coincidence. I didn't set it up that way, but that's what happened when I bought the seagull. And it leads to this pretty interesting doubling of agency, right? Now you are visitor to the art park, and unbeknownst to you, you are also a seagull somewhere in that art park. And so what happens is you start playing the game, you start looking around, like, oh, what am I gonna go look at here? I'm gonna go over here and check this thing out. And at the same time, somewhere else in the desert, the seagull just walks off, and it's just not there anymore. And I love that a lot because it illuminates another kind of key piece of this puzzle about this desert and the idea of money and what's worth what. Which is that the seagull draws a lot of value from the fact that it's interactive. There's this idea of agency and avatar. And it's the sacred property of video games. Like the most special thing about video games is their interactivity. You hear that a lot in game studies. And it's also the hardest thing to exhibit or to estrange, to make noticeable, to defamiliarize. And so what's interesting about that seagull is just this idea, we are it. That's sort of its value. And it's quite possible when you're visiting the desert that you bump into the seagull. You're just like walking along and it's just like, hey, walking along as well. You might not even realize that you're controlling it unless you're paying attention. Or maybe you just get to this empty plinth and you're like, where's the seagull? And then you kind of have to work it out as the sort of detective experience. Like, oh, I think I know what happened. And even if you never find it paddling along the dunes, you know, seeing its plinth is just like this weird other life you didn't know that you were living. And that definitely seems like it's worth $4.99 at the very least. So that's the end of part 2. Video games and money, very deeply intertwined, but that's not usually visible when we play them. So making it visible, defamiliarizing that relationship, worth doing. You know, and money is just kind of a big deal in general, so it's worth thinking about. Okay, last one. This one's going to get a little bit challenging for me, so we'll just see how I do with my keyboard, because I'm going to play these games. So the last material of video games I want to get into may be the most fundamental. If you talk to a game designer or a game theorist or I don't know, a game player even potentially, you ask them what's the sort of the fundamental nature of games, a lot of people will say it's the rules that define the world, that define what you do. That's the main thing about games. And maybe they're right. I mean, I really don't care about definitions, but it's like it's clearly an important part of how games work. And rules are, you know, they're a pretty big part of just life as well. It's not just games that have rules. This is like what my work looked like the other day when I was making this presentation. You know, the rule that I have to run the department council meeting and drive the agenda. The rule that I have to grade my students' work. The rules of making this presentation. The rules of programming when I get a chance to do that. So work is very rulesy. So we could probably make a game about rules through the lens of work. And indeed, here it is. This game is called It Is As If You Were Doing Work. A game where you pretend to work. So it gives you all of the rules of the work that you're going to do up front. It's very clear, tells you exactly what you need to do so that you can just focus on being reassuringly productive. Get the work done. And this comes from a sort of a series of games that I've done, partly in collaboration with a research group that my wife mostly ran, Rila, where we invented this idea called speculative play. So there's this quite popular critical design offshoot called speculative design, which is sort of about looking at near futures to think about and comment on the present. We were interested in like making games from the near future that could comment on the present, with this idea of kind of democratizing the process of, you know, you don't have to go to a museum to play this. You just load it up in your browser. So, reflecting on the future to estrange the present. So this is a game from the near future where people don't need to work anymore because thanks Gen AI, guess we don't have jobs anymore. But they still want the feelings associated with work, because work can be pretty satisfying. So you end up with this. Welcome to It Is As If You Were Doing Work. As you are no doubt very aware, the new machine learning economy has significantly reduced the demand for human graph-produced labor, leading to unemployment rates of over 95%. I don't know that that's accurate, but we'll get there. Although many humans find themselves able to adapt to this post-work era, some among you struggle with a sense of ineffectiveness and a lack of productivity. And we take this very seriously. Not sure who the we is. It is as if you were doing work as an application created especially for those humans who feel a need to recapture an appearance of usefulness through traditional human-computer interaction. Please feel free to launch it as if you were doing work. It's hard to say. Whenever existential concerns about contributing to a larger framework of industry assail you, consider organizing in groups of friends to work with in a larger office setting. And remember, you are human, you are important. So let me run this game. There we go. So I'll log in. I have a saved password. I don't know why. You can type anything in here. It doesn't matter. Okay, so you start the game. So the point of the game is just like, feels good to be effective, right? To just know what the rule is and apply the rule and be rewarded for applying the rule. Are we ready to start work? Yes, we are. Let's go. Okay, write and send an email of at least 448 characters. So you don't have to actually write anything. I'm just like doing like pretend movie typing, hacking. And it's filling it in with some text here. Oh, I got promoted. I'm now a screen administrator. Excellent. This says click input. I did it. Everything yields to diligence. Super true. And so you're starting to, oh, there we go. Set the date to the 27th of September, 2025. That's not September. I'll do that quickly. The problem is this is quite distracting. Click accept. There we go. So I'll stop playing it. It's very compelling. So as you can see, the idea here is that the game looks like work, kind of feels like work as well. It's got like the trappings of it. It's using the Windows 95 theming, because that's like the apogee of work for some reason for me personally. Not that I ever actually used it. And all of the things explicitly tell you what you need to do. So you never have to actually think about anything. It just tells you which button to press. Press action, press start, keep working hard, okay. And when you type things, as you can see, text just magically appears. It's this blend of kind of tech talk, hoverboards, for example, and sort of inspirational, sort of junky stuff that I found on the internet fed into. I forget whether I used a Markov chain or whether I just spat them out. You just can't beat the person who never gives up. Never give up. Oh, we've got the image for never give up as well, so that can be us. So the idea is the rules become apparent, and the dream is with the game that you do this for a while because it's fun, and then it's sort of funny, and then at a certain point, because it just keeps going, like it's got infinite work of this nature for you to do, it becomes absurd, and then ideally you start thinking about, well, why am I liking this so much? What is it about this that feels so good? What is the nature of reality, quite frankly, that makes me crave this experience of just doing work that just functions and works? And that's sort of the idea there with this one. It's also about video games. Video games serve this purpose too, right? A huge point of video games is that they put us in these situations where we know what to do. We are the hero. We are effective. We do have ice magic or whatever it is that we want to be able to do. This is just that, except it's the heroics of just being pretty good at your job. And so the dream is that as you sort of pass through the levels, at some point you can start to ask yourself, like, why does life feel like I need this? That's the idea there. Let me switch back. Did I pull it off? I did. Wonderful. So it's the game about really leaning into this extreme idea of a game that tells you exactly what to do all the time. And I love this idea, so as I will show you in just a second. So here's another one. This is where it actually all began. This is called, it is as if you were playing chess. This is a game where you pretend to play chess, as you might imagine. Drag this to here. So the idea is mostly to play this on the metro with your cell phone. So you're going to look like you're doing something. Lower your head and furrow your brow. Look here, here. Yeah, that'll do it. So this ability to kind of like enact something where you look like a smart person playing chess on their phone, on the metro, or on the bus or whatever. But in fact, you're just following instructions. And again, it feels really good. It's something very soothing about just knowing what to do. So this is another game which is about the sort of surfacing of like, if it was just rules, what happens? Why are rules so satisfying when they're the only thing that we see? This one's a little racy. I don't think I'll show it to you anyway, just for a second. I won't go all the way. This is called It Is As If You Were Making Love. So this is a game about sort of the future of intimacy, sort of. So this is a future, I'll make it a bit bigger for us. It's a future where people are sort of uncomfortable with physical intimacy. People don't like touching each other anymore. It's a bit gross. So there's a program now where you can have that feeling of satisfying somebody else erotically, sexually, and they like communicate with you. They tell you exactly what they want. Slide me slowly between -5 and 5. There we go. Very correct input. Same idea, right? It's the same. Whoop.
Should I be looking away?
Yeah, well, you can if you need to. So I won't, as I said, I won't take this all the way. There is an ending. If you're good at it. But it's the same idea, right? This weirdness of the satisfaction of just knowing what to do all the time is, and wouldn't we love that in the world of sex and relationships? Wouldn't that be great? Okay. This one, last one I'll talk about. I'm going to try and wrap things up in a second. More rules. I actually ended up making this analog version of the work game. So it looks like this is called, it is as if you were doing paperwork. You can just generate arbitrary amounts of paperwork to do. Let's make 100. You can print them out as a PDF. And then you just print them out and you just fill them out because they just tell you what to do, right? Just write whatever your employee ID is, copy the form reference into the box below, write the number of characters in the left column into the right column. So you can sit there and look and feel effective like a good government worker. But again, you don't have to think about anything. You don't have to feel anxious about your job or whether you're doing the right thing. There's no ambiguity. It just tells you what you need to be doing. So we're just hopping on this theme a little bit, but it is a great theme. And I worked with these great curators, and kind of appropriately in Moscow, if you're into sort of Kafkaesque bureaucracy stuff. And they made this amazing installation. So I actually made this for them, where they had these 4 office cubicles, and there was a boss at the front. They were assigning you paperwork. You would sit down, you had a stamp and all kinds of stuff to just be there and fill out paperwork at this museum in Moscow. It's quite pink. I don't know if I would have done the set design in the same way that they did it, but really, really interesting setup that they came up with. So just briefly, what I'm working on now, I'm kind of expanding ever outwards with this idea. I'm obsessed with it, as you can tell. I'm working on a game called It Is As If You Were on Your Phone, which is going to be a game where you just look like you're using your phone. So again, you're sitting somewhere, you're at a party, and you don't want to talk to anybody. So you get out your phone, but you kind of don't want to be on your phone because it's like super negative, and you don't want to read the news, you don't want to like your friends' Instagram posts and all of that. So what you really want is to look like you're on your phone, but not really be on your phone. And so this handles that for you. So it tells you, scroll down, tap here, swipe left, swipe right, depending on what you're doing. So it's just going to be this collection of interactions, and you just look as if you're using your phone. That's what I'm working on right now. Should have it finished in the next 1,000 years because I'm the department chair. But in theory, like month or something like that. And then I'm really going to get pretty serious. Second half of the year, I'm going to try and work on It Is As If You Were Being a Person. Don't totally know what that's going to be, but I think that this is a possible thing to make. So I'm looking forward to figuring that one out. So yeah, we were talking about rules when we went all over the place with that one. But all of those games are really about encountering the rules of play much more explicitly than usual, right? Like usually you know what the rules are, but it's sort of a bit complicated to apply them in games and in life. And it's about mapping play to life and making the rules of life feel like they show up as well. Like the work game makes us wonder why we're so anxious about work and why work sucks so much, for example. There's this very basic desire to just know what the rules are so that you can play or work or love or just be according to those rules successfully. And there we go. So the power of estrangement in video game design is basically, I think, that it helps us see what games are made out of and that that's worth doing, things like time and money and rules. And if we keep our attention on those materials, then how we play and make games, I think, can change. It can be more diverse, it can be more aware, more attentive, more fun, more inventive. And I think, not so secretly that games have this power to estrange life. Like when we play games, we can think about what they mean about our lives. They can be integrated into our lives if we're pretending to be using our phone at a party or something. And they can be about the same things like time and money and rules. Because if we keep our attention on the materials of life, then maybe we can change how we play that as well. And that would be pretty special. Thank you very much.
So much. Is this on? We've got a microphone today, so you can ask questions, and I'll bring a mic around for Pippin. Is that okay, Pippin?
Of course.
Okay, great. Someone have your hand up back here.
So the phone scrolling one,
yeah,
that you just showed kind of reminded me of these like unique overlaps with psychology and when people are fighting addictions, like those ghost habits or rituals. I think of those little like whistles when people vape. I wonder if I am pretending to play on my phone actually has some really good mental health benefits for those who are quitting their apps.
It's like a fidget spinner, except like really tuned into the thing that you're trying not to do. I certainly haven't thought of that, but I have started to think about these things in an almost mental healthy kind of a way. Just the phone thing especially, like I don't know if anybody else has a problem with their phone, but I know that I do. Just that thing of like, yeah, you need to be doing it, but it'll be great to just not actually be doing it. I actually, speaking of maybe more to your point, I don't know if I'll be able to, let's see if this doesn't work in touch mode. I'll just see if I can get something to show up for you. So it's a sound cue. There we go. No, you didn't hear it. So one of the random things I was doing while I was experimenting with this game is I had Zen gongs play whenever you tapped one of the circles. And it felt really chill. I was like, whoa, this could be a meditation app. It's like you leverage the comforting interactions of social media, like swiping and scrolling, but you kind of tune it into a more kind of Zen-y meditative experience without all of the attacks of social media on top of it. So yeah, I'm thinking about that. Kind of, I went a different way, I think, with the game as it is, but I kind of want to make a parallel one that's addressing exactly that kind of thing. Yeah.
When you were when you had the idea to create the game based on the artist exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art, you said you worked together with her on that. Yeah. How did you get in contact with? It was like cold email.
She reached out to me.
Oh.
Yeah, no, she was like, so it's a pretty funny story. It's kind of, maybe it's a sad story. I don't know. She so I made that game. Historically, I realized that she gave talks like in the sort of subsequent years where she talked about me. She said I was a Swedish game developer, actually from New Zealand. But that was fine. That was fine. But she talked about playing it, so she played it. She got kicked out of the queue because she went to make an omelet or something. That's why I usually use that example. But then she was doing a Kickstarter because she had this plan to make the Marina Abramović Institute. It was going to be this place in New York State where you could go and do her exercises and see long durational performances. It's quite a beautiful idea, and she's very ambitious as a person. And so she reached out to me to say, oh, would you be interested in making some game stuff for the Kickstarter as rewards for people basically to do it? And so I got to chat to her on Skype, which was totally surreal. And we had conversations, and so I did. I made those Sesame games, but I also, how would I find this one? This one. I actually made a version of the institute that she was going to make, so you could actually go into it. I think I've got it. You can see what I'm seeing. That's good. Where did I put it? Sorry. Let's see if I won't thrash too much if this isn't working. Oh, here it is. It's a bit small. I think this one doesn't close. If it's closed, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, this is good. So it was going to be this idea that you could go and have the experience that she was wanting people to have in this real place. And then the whole thing kind of fell through, unfortunately. And so the institute never got made. It doesn't exist, but this still exists, albeit now needing to be. Oh yeah, there's so many. Sorry, I'm not going to go into this game. There's so many funny things, like you have to sign a contract. Signed it.
I'm also wondering, but when you made the original game, the artist is present.
Yeah.
Were you in contact with her at the time, or she reached out to you afterwards?
Yeah. No. I just made it because it was so funny. I started it because it was so funny, and then I thought, oh, this is really interesting. It was at a time as well in the kind of the indie games movement where there just wasn't any stuff that was trying to cross over between contemporary art, and I mean, there's still not much, but there was nothing, and so it surprised people a lot. There was a lot of interest when that one came out because people were just so shocked that there could be a game about this completely wrong thing that still kind of worked. And then I think she was just interested in that, so she reached out to do some stuff together. And as I said, I did make that sequel. The Artist is Present 2, I called it. There, where you get to be her. you can try that one out.
What programming languages do you use to make these type of games?
I would say, so in the early days, it was all Flash and ActionScript, and then they killed Flash, which is why, like, on my website, there's all of these, like, red, this is a Flash project, and it's been discontinued. I'm sad, basically. So a lot of Flash, and then I mostly, like, I would say the majority of stuff that I've made, I used Hax for a while, which is a pretty cool programming language. But a lot of stuff I pivoted to JavaScript, basically, because I've always wanted my stuff to be on the web, to be accessible, not through a storefront, not through a download, to just create the maximum likelihood that somebody will just click on it and just to see what it is, right? No barriers. So a lot of JavaScript, some Unity, and then some random stuff like Inform and Bitsy, and I mean, yeah, a bunch of other stuff, but primarily, I guess, if I'm writing code, it's in JavaScript, sometimes C#. Yeah.
Thank you. First, thank you so much for designing really fun games, affordable as well. I can definitely splurge on these. I'm interested in the concept of you're talking about noting the materiality of games, their time, their code. I'm thinking also of Marjoram Did's recent book, Everything to Play For, where she notes the actual material construction of the consoles and computers that we play these games on. And looking at some of your games, especially some of those games based off of mythologies such as Sisyphus and so forth, I'm seeing this repetition of self-inflicted existential pain.
Yeah.
And the way these games estrange time, money, but also consequence. Looking at these games at a time of, especially in Albuquerque, like overhearing conversations about like, God damn it, the app has not loaded yet on my capacity to fill out these bureaucratic forms on whether or not I get to be a citizen. Gosh darn it, I've been waiting for 6 months at the border. Like you peek over the walls. No, not really. I'm making light of it in the privileged way that I can, because it's horrifying actually that these systems actually are manifesting in real life as determined techniques. Looking at that one game of As If You Were Doing Work made me think of, as if I were president, and just seeing the auto forms fill in executive order number, and all of the tensions that people had around, Project 2025 of the things being auto fed and whatnot. And I'm wondering, like, how do you estrange someone from consequence when games are famously meant for you to not feel consequence?
It's a great question. I mean, I feel like that brings up a lot of stuff for me, and I don't know where to start. But yeah, how do you do it? I mean, I think the beauty of games in a lot of ways is, and I'm talking maybe specifically about video games, so much effort and money has been spent on making games be a specific way, very, like, essentially pretty predictable. You know what you're getting. The good thing about that is that when you deviate from that even a little bit, the defamiliarization kicks in right away, because people, as game players, all of us, I mean, myself included, are just used to things being a particular way. It's like the difference between, watching something on Netflix and watching something by Jean-Luc Godard or something like that. Is like, holy shit, like what is this guy doing with the movie? It's very easy to do that with games, because it's just easy to be shocking, because there's so much space that hasn't been explored. The design space of games is massive compared to what has been explored. But I think your point about some of the political framings of this is really important. It's not work that I have done a lot of. I often don't feel qualified, to be honest. But there's a Ph.D. Well, he's a doctor, a student who used to be with us at TAG, Iki Llagostera. He made this great game about immigration, which was, he's Brazilian. You had to, so it's basically like you show up at the border and they give you kitchen equipment and you have to cook your special national dish for them, so that they feel like you're, you know, one of the good immigrants who can bring like delicious culture into the country. And you actually enact, you know, stirring things, making brigadeiros or whatever it is from Brazil. And like that's an example. Like these sorts of absurdist, bureaucratic nightmare scenarios do work really well as games, like as broken games, especially because they're totally broken. And games can reflect that in a really powerful way, because you notice so strongly when the game isn't playing fair with you, right? Like maybe here's a good example. Maybe this is summarizes everything in some ways. This is a whole bunch of variations of Pong, but there's one in particular it's making me think of. Unfair Pong. Just this, right? Like there's a lot of politics in a simple unfair experience. Oh, fuck. It's not easy being the dot guy. Yes.
But you're also playing against yourself here too.
I am, yeah. Well, yeah, that's a whole thing as well. What does that say about me? So the politics of games is, I mean, they work extremely well, or they can work extremely well because they reflect systems, and they can reflect broken systems as well as working ones. Yeah.
I want to kind of build onto that. I'm seeing a lot of parallels between life and looking for meaning in games. So I'm kind of curious as to what your take is on the goal of gaming, whether that's making or playing games.
Jesus.
I know that's a broad question.
It's a big one.
I've heard a lot of people kind of say that, you know, look at it through the psychology perspective of psychological theories or the fun perspective, but I see a lot of like teaching in your games, and kind of teaching and learning. So
yeah, I mean, if I think about myself as a player, I mean, as a person making games, and maybe you sympathize, I don't know if you also make games, but you just kind of, you make what you make because it's who you are, and it's your history and your personality and the things that you're interested in and the people who taught you, and it just kind of comes out. In playing games, for me personally, I like what we were just talking about before. I like to be surprised. I like to run into things that are just like, wow, how did this person even think of this? What am I doing right now? And one thing, I'm extremely privileged. I'm on the jury pretty regularly for the Independent Games Festival. They have this prize called the Nuovo Award, which is for experimental design every year. And if you make experimental games, you should submit to it. We're always looking for cool stuff. But I get to play a lot of super weird games. I'm playing this game right now. Let me advertise it to you. Yeah, Titanic 2 Orchestra for a Dying Sea. I don't want to tell you too much about it. Just on itch. It's a pay what you want game. It's the sequel to the movie Titanic. The claim on the website is that it was played after the credits of the first movie, which is quite good. But it's so weird. It's like not like a game. The music is very powerful. The use of sound. So just anything that surprises me, I'm all about it. Basically, that's what I want. I want to be surprised.
Yeah. I'm really interested. Hi. I'm really interested in how you talk about estrangement and how that deals with attention and thinking about value and like human value, I guess, in general, sort of typically being about what, or I guess I like the dichotomy about values of things that are valuable because they are normal and we don't notice them, and then things that become valuable once we notice them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of, I don't know, maybe you could elaborate more on that sort of dichotomy of value.
I mean, one of the good things about giving talks is I hadn't really been thinking super deeply. I've run into Shklovsky's defamiliarization, estrangement things a bunch over the years. Like it's always, every time I read that particular, everyone should read that article. It's not even that long. It's very, very interesting. But it's not a thing that I had been staking my work on. But yeah, I was returning to it because of this talk. I was like, well, I gotta sound smart, so I better get a Russian theorist in there. Is he Russian? I think he's Russian. And yeah, you get a chance by talking about things to try and surface the bigger picture. And I do think that estrangement thing is super powerful. It's a particular. I think he's right that it's this particular function of art. And I mean, I really don't want to talk about generative AI, but like we're in a moment, right, where more and more stuff is being churned out that is not surprising. It's like so precisely what you would expect. It's crazy, unless you're one of those people messing around with small data sets or finding the seams of these technologies. It's like this machine for making what you would expect. And I do feel like, probably I'm wrong, I'm going to die unhappy, but like there's more and more space for these things that do surprise us and make us notice what's going on much more than just like the churn of the normal being vomited into our mouths, or whatever the appropriate metaphor is. But yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's something I need to think about more, I think, is my real answer. Yeah. I've been up since 1 a.m.
So as like, on the development side and on the gaming side, and as specific to video games, I guess, like resource management, memory, VRAM, all this kind of stuff takes so much time, or at least so much consideration. If you're a gamer, you're thinking, oh, what am I running? What GPU do I have? And when you're developing, you constantly have to think about like, will this even run? And it is kind of this hidden material, except, like you said, until you notice it, and then it's very much visible as a player or as a developer. And I was wondering how do you view that kind of like resource allocation as like a material within game making, and have you explored that idea much?
That's a super cool point. I don't know if I've ever gotten all the way down to VRAM. I did do computer science when I was younger, so I was like thinking about that kind of stuff. But speaking to that, like I'm always fascinated by how low down the implications for design are in the materials. So it's tempting to sort of stay comfortably with like rules is pretty safe and graphics and stuff. But yeah, one of the things I think about often, and I've always wanted to write a book about this, is the design implications of the basic structures of programming. So, to take a look at how loops influence the way that games turn out, how conditionals influence the way that games turn out, variables. Like I think there's so much there. It's like, it's obvious when you start thinking about it that those fundamentals of programming are reflected not just in the code of games, but in the way their games are and the kinds of things that they can do. And I'm sure that if you headed on down VRAM Street, it would be kind of the same thing. Like all of this stuff is speaking to everything else, and like, yeah. But it sounds like you should write that one.
Well, I mean, I was thinking even more like, like you were talking about the Taj Mahal is 180 whatever megabytes, right? So when you put that in your game, you are imposing that on the player, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's a consideration for the player. Like now with these like 30 gigabyte games, if you're lucky, like, yeah, I was wondering if you'd like sort of played around with that idea at all. Sort of like you're making, every time you implement something, you're making some demand on the player or on the player's console or whatever it may be.
It's true. Yeah, so I do think about that. I mean, I think about it in the boring, like I'm stressed out because my game's too big or something. Like that, the $4.99 game is just so big because it's just got so many assets in it that are doing nothing. Like there's just one of each one, right? And I think it's a couple of gigabytes to download that very simple game, which is part of the point, but it's, it also means that lots of people don't play it because it's too big. It's like, I don't want to download your 2 gigabyte stupid museum. But I've played with that in other directions. I made this game, Super Mario Nothing, where I don't know if this was worth doing, but I manually zeroed out a ROM of Super Mario Bros. So that it still runs. So I didn't delete the boot code, but it runs into just a green screen of death. So yeah, I love thinking about that kind of underpinning stuff. Again, mostly if I'm going to think about something like that, I want to turn it kind of into the project so that it's the focal point. Another one that I just want to hype up for a second. This is one of the things that I'm most proud of. It's called the Nothings Suite. And I basically just made nothing in a whole lot of game engines. So it's like, this is what you get if you make a Twine with nothing. Just don't do anything. Then you just get the default, double click this passage to edit it. But if you make nothing in like Unity, it's got like a loading screen and a loading bar and all kinds of a fade, and then you just get that because that's what Unity gives you when you start a game. But then this is interesting to me, just like, bear with me just for 1 second. Unreal 4, compared to Unity, right? They're direct competitors. Looks disgusting, by the way. Their default looks hideous. I guess they just expected I would do a better job. It's huge, 31 megabyte, nothing. Still loading. But it's sort of like, to me, like Unreal is interesting because it seems really anxious that you like it in a way that Unity is just like zen. Not that Unity is cool or anything, but look at Unreal. It's like, yeah, you can like fly in the sky. And there's like a platform somewhere over here. Where did it go? There. You fly and there's collisions. You can collide with this thing. It's like they've stacked a lot of stuff into what is nothing. So yeah, I think you can make work about that kind of thing. And you can write a lot about it too. I mean, I spend a lot of my time writing about what I'm doing, which isn't obvious, it's not in the games, but it's a huge part of what I'm doing is trying to work out what it is that this means as well and try and explain some of that to myself. And one quick plug, this game, this is from this game, this awesome sweater. You should buy an awesome sweater like this. She needs the money. This game is amazing and strange, and it's called Crypt Underworld. You should check it out. It's very trippy. It's by Lilith Zone. Lilith Zone, with a foreword by Marina Abramović, apparently. Okay.
We got time for one more question. Does anyone got? Okay, we're gonna hand it. What part of game design do you think is the most challenging part of it?
I feel like that's a really interesting question. I think that the most difficult thing to me, I think it's probably very personal. I feel like the most difficult thing, or maybe just the most important thing for me, is working out, because I'm not making fun games, but this probably applies for fun as well. But like if you're making a game that's meant to have an idea, it's working out exactly what that idea is and then trying to continually stay true to it throughout the process and letting it be part of every decision that you're making. So one of the things, I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Maybe Sibilant Snake Lakes has got a good example of this. So I do a huge amount of process documentation. Great. Is it HTML? No, that's not a good example then because I can't show it to you. Maybe one of these is gonna. Sometimes when I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to browse my computer in front of you. When I'm being a good designer, when I start a project, I used to call them manifestos. Now I just call it like, why am I doing this or something? And I try and explain what it is that this thing is about, what it's meant to sort of feel like, what it's trying to tell you. And then for one thing, I try and revisit that all the time and make sure that like, if I'm naming a variable, that I should check, like, is it part of that? If I am choosing a 3D model, it should reflect that idea. And I also try and rewrite that idea over and over again because your idea changes while you're making a project. But staying true to that is super hard because, well, you know, like you just fall into familiar patterns. You're like, oh, well, I'll make it a platformer or whatever. And
you're like,
forget.
Yeah, you're like, oh, why not this? Why not that? Hey, how about this?
So staying true to an idea, that's hard. That's really hard. Yeah. It's a great question.
All right, thank you very much, Pippin, and thanks everybody for coming out. Let's clap for Pippin.
Thank you.
But Pippin, you're going to be standing around here for a second or two, so I'm sure if you have a question, Pippin will answer for you. He's a really nice person. We've all learned that. Thanks a lot for coming out again, everybody. We appreciate it.
I love your kind of like work games, like kind of like they're like fun. The coolest is so fun about it.
Because that's like a genre these days. It's kind of like task simulator, except it's such like a in your face, like you are just doing